Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k Tyranids. We've got another detachment review today, bit of an analysis video again. This time we're going to be looking at the Vanguard Onslaught Detachment from the new Tyranid Codex. So let's break this detachment down and give you my sort of summing up of the actual detachment itself. Now of course we've already done some previous detachments. We've done the Crusher Stampede, done Unending Swarm, Assimilation Swarm. So I believe this is the fourth one that we've done now. Of course the Invasion Fleet has already been done. That was the launch detachment. So let's get into the Vanguard Onslaught. So their unique detachment rule is questing Tendrils. So Tyranid units with this ability are eligible to charge in a turn in which they fell back. And if they got the Vanguard Invader keyword, they're able to advance and charge. So there's kind of two parts to that. There's also another part which is Death Leapers lose the Hunter Organism rule, so they can effectively be your Warlord. So you only need to have one character of course, and that could be your character, could be your Warlord. You don't necessarily need to take more characters. But going back to the questing Tendrils, army wide you can fall back and then recharge, which means you're going to gain the fight first ability. But your Vanguard Invaders are going to be advancing and charging, which is a huge deal. Let's go through all the units that have gained this new keyword, which is Vanguard Invaders. So you've got the Winged Tyranid Prime, you've got the Winged Hive Tyrant, the Neurolictor, Broodlords, Parasite Mortrex, Gargoyles, Gene Stealers, Death Leaper, Harpy, Hive Crone, Lictors, Tyranid, and the Von Ryan's Leapers. So all the sneaky stuff, or all the stuff with wings, effectively have gained this new keyword. All of them can advance and charge. So that is pretty good. I mean, imagine a Flying Hive Tyrant with advance and charge, or a Broodlord with the Gene Stealers. They've already got the Scout ability. Or maybe Von Ryan's Leapers, which have got the Infiltrate ability. Being able to advance and charge straight away, that's crazy. We're going to get into some other things that can kind of assist with those as well later in this video. Right, so first we're going to talk about the enhancements next. The 4 new enhancements for this specific detachment alone are as follows. The first one is Hunting Grounds for 20 points. And effectively, as soon as your opponent brings a unit from reserves onto the battlefield, on a 2+ roll, you're going to force them to take a Battle Shock test. Now there's some good to that and there's some bad to that. Let's start with the bad. I mean, first of all, you've missed the command phase here, so they've already, it's not going to have any interaction with scoring, although they weren't going to score anyway, I suppose. So it doesn't really make that much of a difference. However, there is things that will have a difference and it will have an effect. For example, if you do Battle Shock this unit that comes on the battlefield, first of all, they're not going to be able to use any stratagems. Their OC is going to go to 0. And if they are trying to do secondaries such as deploy teleport homers, that requires a unit to not be Battle Shocked, they're not going to be able to do those kind of secondaries. So you can really limit your opponents with their secondaries cards. So it could be a decent one, and your bearer only needs to simply be on the battlefield in order to do that. So there's no range for it, it just happens as soon as an opponent comes on, and that could be any of the turns, which is pretty cool. And also bear in mind, there's no restriction to this, you can just keep doing this. It's every time a unit comes on from reserves, it isn't just the once. So if your opponent, if you're going up against like the Deathwing Terminators for example, or Chaos Demons that are constantly bringing units in, doing this often could be pretty cool actually. So you know what, I think that one gets a thumbs up from me. Chameleonic is next for 15 points. It's for an invader unit only. They gain stealth and the benefits of cover. Now this is, first of all, you need to consider the fact that if you're putting this on say a Broodlord, that's only going to work on the Broodlord and not going to work on the actual Gene Stealers, because they don't gain the keyword as well. So you've got to take that into consideration. Maybe this is good on a Flying Hive Tyrant because he's working solo, having stealth and cover all game. Pretty cool, I think that could be good. Stalker is next. This one's the cheap one for 10 points. Again, it's an invader unit only. It's a +1 to hit and a +1 to wound against a selected target pre-game. Again, this is only going to work on the bearer and not the unit with the bearer. So again, I'd probably be looking at the Flying Hive Tyrant again. You can't be putting on a Death Leaper because of course that's an epic hero. So there's not that many options when you consider it that way. And the final one is the Neuro Node, which I actually really like this one. So this is 30 points, it's quite expensive. And effectively you can redeploy 3 invader units. And there is a little bit of a stipulation here, because you can do this after you've actually rolled off to see who goes first. Unlike my Catan Shot of the Deceiver from the Necrons, who doesn't get that bonus, I suppose. You've got to kind of pull your units off and then you see who goes first. So you get to see who goes first and then you get to plan from it. So you could be putting units into deep strike reserves, and this could relate to some of the stratagems which we're going to talk about in a moment. So just remember that one, hold that thought. So let's move into the stratagems. In fact, the first one, which is Surprise Assault, is 1 command point. It is a battle tactic stratagem, so therefore your Hive Tyrant could use the Will of the Hive Mind ability using battle tactic stratagems, and this is one of them. Your shooting phase or your fight phase, or any other fight phases, this is where this can be happening. You're going to select either you're going to be selecting one Vanguard Invader unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot or fight this phase, and you're selecting one enemy unit. The enemy unit must take a Battle Shock test, and until the end of the phase, each time a model in your unit makes an attack against that specific enemy unit, it's a +1 to the hit roll, and if they are Battle Shocked, it's a +1 to the wound roll as well. So before getting into this, there's a weird interaction with this, in fact, because it doesn't actually require you to force Battle Shock on the unit that you're actually targeting. If you actually read the actual stratagem itself, you just simply, before you actually shot or before you fought, you just select an enemy unit. It's as simple as that, you just select an enemy unit. Now of course, if you do select a different enemy unit to the one you're shooting or fighting against, you're not going to gain the buffs for the hit rolls and wound rolls, but maybe you're shooting at one particular target and you kind of know you're going to deal with them anyway. So you could kind of target a different unit that's on an objective, and then if they're battle shocked, they're going to have objective control 0, which makes a huge difference to the primaries and secondaries. So I mean, this stratagem may get FAQ'd. And going back to the actual whole point of this, getting a +1 to the hit and wound roll, that is nice. That is nice as well, I suppose, and the battle shock side of it too. It is a surprise assault. The second one, Assassin Beasts for 1 command point, another battle tactic stratagem here. In any of the fight phases, one Vanguard Invader infantry unit from your army that has not been selected to fight yet basically gains precision. Now, a few of our infantry units already have precision, like the Neurolictors, Death Leapers, Lictors, they've all got precision, and they're infantry of course. And if you're talking about monsters, which this stratagem isn't, but if you were to have a character that's a monster, you could just use the Epic Challenge stratagem from the core rulebook to gain the precision ability in melee. But this one could be kind of good for a Broodlord with the Gene Stealers, because the entire unit this time does get it. And don't forget, Broodlords provide dev wounds to the entire unit, including the Gene Stealers. So precision with dev wounds, that could be quite nasty. Number 3, we've got Seeded Broods for 1 command point. In your movement phase, 1 Tyranid unit from your army that's in reserves, or up to 2 Tyranid Invader units that are in reserves. Until the end of the phase, for the purpose of setting up these selected units on the battlefield, treat the current battle round number as being 1 higher than it actually is. This one's nasty because in turn 1, it's going to be treated as if it's turn 2. So that means you can do a deep strike in turn 1. That's kind of cool. Also for strategic reserves, in turn 3 you can come on any battlefield edge. So you can do that in turn 2 now. Or standard strategic reserves, you can do it in turn 1 from other table edges, not your opponent's edges. You can do that in turn 1 from strategic reserves, because you're going to treat the battle round as 1 higher than it actually is. Now, I mentioned earlier when we were talking about one of the enhancements, the Neuro Node, the 30-point enhancement, that you're going to relate it to a stratagem, and this is the one. Simply because you know who's going first. Let's say you're going first, or second, it doesn't really matter at this stage. You use this stratagem, use the enhancement, to pull 3 units off the battlefield, invader units, and you're going to redeploy them. So you can actually redeploy them into reserves, into strategic reserves, or deep strike reserves, whatever you want to call it. And then in turn 1, you could be bringing them back in. And then that's when you go, haha, I've gotcha. Because you could put them in the no man's land if there's no space in the battlefield, just put them in the no man's land, which is kind of like having infiltrate. Or you could, if there is gaps in the battlefield, you can just put them in the battlefield, turn 1, that will really catch your opponent out. So I think I quite like that one combined with the Neuro Node. Pretty cool, but even without the Neuro Node, it's still kind of cool. Deep strike turn 1, nice. Next we've got the Hypersensory Cilia, which is in your opponent's movement phase just after an enemy unit ends a normal, advance or fallback move. So just as the opponent's ended one of those following moves, up to 2 Vanguard Invader units from your army that are within 9 inches of that enemy unit, or 1 Tyranid infantry unit that's within 9 inches of that enemy unit, can basically do a normal move up to 6 inches. Now, if you're using two Vanguard Invader units, they must be within 9 inches of the same enemy unit, for whatever reason. But do note that if you're using the invaders, the Vanguard Invaders, they're not restricted to infantry. Whereas if you're taking a non-invader unit, then they are restricted to infantry only. So it's going to get units out of dodge if they don't want to get into a fight, such as your zone throats potentially. They don't want to get into a fight and they're infantry. But it also gets something like a Flyrant closer into close proximity of a unit. And they've also got a large base, so they could be potentially blocking avenues out just by their base, in fact. We're on to the next one. Unseen Lurkers for 1 command point in your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. This one's a bit of a weird one. So 1 Vanguard Invader unit from your army that was selected as a target. Until the end of the phase, your unit can only be selected as a target if they're within 12 inches. So effectively, they kind of become lone operatives in a way. And if they've already got the lone operative ability, then it's actually within 6, not within 12. Your opponent does get to select a new target, unfortunately, so they can just kind of bait you out and make you spend CP. But it could also mess with your opponent's plans. If they've really got their sights set on a specific unit and you change their plans by using the stratagem, then they can't fire. Now this is really good for your lone operatives in particular, because maybe your opponent's trying to jump on them with deep strike units, they're within 9 inches and they're trying to fire at them. And then you go, haha, I'm going to use this Unseen Lurkers ability stratagem, and now you need to be within 6, which you're not because you've just came in from Deep Strike, so it could protect them in that way. And your lone operatives, you've got the Death Leaper, Neurolictor, Parasite Mortrex, or even our standard Lictors. They've all got the lone operative ability, so they're the ones that will probably benefit the most with that 6 inch. But other units with 12, that's not too bad. The last one we've got is Unseen, no it's not, it's Invisible Hunters. Invisible Hunter, 1 command point. This one's amazing. This one's amazing. So at the end of your opponent's fight phase, up to 2 Vanguard Invader units from your army or 1 Tyranid infantry unit from your army, you simply remove them from the battlefield and put them in strategic reserves. Now you can't be using them if they are within 3 inches of an enemy unit, so you can't be doing it on those units. But this is incredible. Have all, you're taking up 2 units potentially if you're doing Vanguard Invader units, and they don't need to be infantry. If they're not Vanguard Invader units, then they do have to be infantry, and it's only 1 unit there. So ideally you're picking up 2 Vanguard Invader units. Now Raveners have a similar inbuilt ability with their Death from Below ability, where they're popping out of the game into reserves at the end of your opponent's turn, which is kind of where this is, or end of the opponent's fight phase is basically the end of their turn, isn't it? So it's very similar, but this is 2 Vanguard units. So you could be doing this on, again, a Flying Hive Tyrant. You could be pulling them out and bringing them back in. It could be Gargoyles that have got a lot of OC. And don't forget, when you're bringing them back in, it's going to be your reinforcement step of your movement phase. Already you've got some new cards from the Leviathan deck, some secondaries. Maybe you've just pulled Investigate Signal. Maybe you've just pulled Behind Enemy Lines. Maybe you've just pulled No Man's Land. All of a sudden you've got these units that are in Deep Strike, or in reserves that have got Deep Strike. Most of them have Deep Strike, and you're going to be bringing them back in from Deep Strike. And now you can look at your cards and go, I need a unit in that particular location in the corner of the battlefield potentially to do Investigate Signal, and I've got nothing on the table that's there. However, I've now got some Gargoyles that are in reserves because I've just used this stratagem. And you're doing it with 2 units, so that could be, again, Behind Enemy Lines, that could just do that. So the advantage is you're getting to see your cards and then you're bringing them back in wherever you want, really. Obviously you've got the 9 inch restriction, but it is very useful. I mean, with our Necrons, we've got the Ophidian Destroyers. Have got a very similar ability to the Raveners, in fact, and I absolutely love them. I think they're an auto-include because of that reason. So having this with virtually any unit with the Vanguard Invader ability is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. It almost feels like Chaos Demons in a way, with their Realms of Chaos stratagem. Just bringing units in and out all day long. Really good. Let's move into the pros and cons for taking this detachment. There's not many cons, really. I've got some pros for you, but there's a lot of Vanguard Invader units. Unlike the Assimilation Swarm, when there was only 4 units to deal with, this time we've got quite a lot. You could have the entire army having this keyword, which is really cool. The Questing Tendrils ability is also a very good role. We didn't talk about it too much in this actual video because the enhancements and stratagems are so good. But having the ability to fall back and recharge, or advance and charge, I think is very strong. It's very mobile, and as overall this detachment is extremely fast. When you've got, again, Gene Stealers with Infiltrate, you've got Gargoyles with Deep Strike, and they're moving rapid already, and then you're being able to advance and charge with some of these units. It's very good. Your Death Leaper can be your Warlord if you wanted to, so you don't necessarily need to have lots of characters, or even more than just that really, because it can be a Warlord. As I said, you've got decent enhancements, you've got amazing stratagems, especially the Invisible Hunter stratagem. I think that one is definitely good. And it's just very tricksy in general, which I really quite like. As for the cons, it's less beneficial to shooty Necron... Ooh, I said Necrons. It's less beneficial to shooty Tyranid units. Gotta stop doing that. I've got to stop doing that. Less beneficial to shooty Tyranid units, because this kind of benefits melee, really. Being able to advance and charge, fall back and charge. But it also does benefit like scoring units, I suppose, but we're on the cons now. But yeah, the shooter units don't really gain much. You still can use them, they can still do just, fine, they can do okay. Exocrines, Tyrannofex, they can do okay. There's nothing wrong with bringing them in this detachment, but they're not gaining the buffs like they would in other detachments. But yeah, what's my overview for this detachment? Vanguard Onslaught, I love this one, to be honest with you. It's probably my best one out of the 5. My most favourite one. It's so speedy, so tricksy. Bringing units on, bringing units off. Moving them around to deal with the project, which is the primaries, the secondaries. Just having that flexibility as well. And then to add on top of that as an extra bonus, being able to advance and charge or fall back and charge, is just going to really assist you with removing models, which then goes back to our number 1 point, which is going to assist you with your OC and your primaries and secondary objectives, which I quite like doing. But yeah, advance and charge I think is a pretty big deal. But yeah, for me, definitely a huge thumbs up, and that's probably my go-to detachment with Tyranids. But guys, do you like it as much as I do? Let me know down in the comments down below. Remember to subscribe when you exits. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next one.